I never thought someone could disappear from your life like a shadow at noon. One minute he was there laughing, holding my hand, promising he'd always be around. The next he was gone, leaving only an echo of what once was. His name was Ryan. We had met during college. That classic whirlwind of late-night study sessions and coffee-fueled debates. He was charming in a way that made you forget the world outside our little bubble. I was drawn to him instantly, not just for his looks, though he had those in spades, but for his energy, his confidence, the way he made you feel like you could conquer anything with him by your side. We dated for 3 years, and for most of that time, it felt perfect. At least I thought it was perfect. Ryan had a way of taking over the narrative, making you feel like you were living a dream, even when things weren't ideal. He was ambitious, focused on climbing the corporate ladder, and he expected me to be just as motivated. That was fine. I thrived in challenges, but then life hit me with something unexpected, a family crisis that left me physically and emotionally drained. I won't go into every detail, but suffice it to say I was struggling. Bills piled up, my confidence wavered, and every day felt heavier than the last. I needed him, not just for comfort, but for partnership. I thought that's what we had. I thought he would stand by me. He did in single quotes T. One evening. I called him, my voice trembling. Ryan, I don't know what to do. I can't handle this alone. His reply was short. You'll manage. You always do. I tried to hide the hurt in my voice, but he noticed. Or maybe he didn't care. I have a lot on my plate too. I can't deal with your problems right now. That was it. That was the moment I understood something fundamental about him. He loved the idea of me when everything was easy, but when life became messy, he vanished. The next week, he stopped answering my calls. He stopped replying to messages. He even ignored my attempts to meet up, leaving me desperate for a trace of him, a hint that he still cared. But there was nothing. Silence, cold, absolute silence. I was devastated, I won't lie. I felt abandoned, betrayed, and completely powerless. But somewhere, amidst the heartbreak, a tiny ember sparked inside me. I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I had given him power over my life. My happiness, my peace, my sense of worth, all tied to a man who disappeared when I needed him most. And if I was ever going to reclaim my life, I couldn't let that happen again. For weeks, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he was dealing with something he couldn't share. But deep down, I knew the truth. He left because it was convenient for him. Because he wanted the best parts of me without the burdens. Because when the going got tough, he didn't stick around. I cried. I screamed into pillows. I paced the apartment at night. But slowly, I began to see clarity through the fog of heartbreak. His absence, as painful as it was, revealed a truth I hadn't wanted to face. I had underestimated my own strength, and that's when the ember became a fire. I started planning not revenge in the way people imagine, but a reclamation. A way to rebuild my life, stronger, smarter, untouchable by someone who once held my heart. Every setback, every sleepless night, every pang of loneliness became fuel. I wouldn't just survive, I would thrive. And he, the man who vanished when I needed him, would one day realize the power he threw away. The path wouldn't be simple. There would be obstacles, doubts, and moments where I'd question whether I could really do this alone. But I also knew this: someone who abandons you doesn't get to control your future. Ryan thought he walked away unscathed. He thought he had no consequences to face. But he had underestimated me, and that mistake would cost him more than he could ever imagine. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift slightly from my chest. This was the start not just of a new chapter in my life, but of a reckoning that he would never see coming. The days after Ryan disappeared were the hardest. I woke up expecting him to be there, expecting his voice, his laughter, even his criticisms. But the apartment was empty, silent, and it forced me to confront something I had been avoiding for years. I was entirely on my own at first. The loneliness was suffocating. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every promise he had made. I asked myself over and over if I had done something wrong, if I had been too much, too needy, too weak. But deep down, I knew the truth. He left because he didn't want to be there, because when life got complicated, he vanished. And that said far more about him than it did about me. I started small. Simple routines that grounded me. Morning walks, journaling my thoughts, cooking meals for myself. At first, it felt strange to exist without his influence, to make decisions that only affected me. But slowly, I began to taste the freedom I hadn't realized I'd lost. I also reached out to the people Ryan had tried to push me away from. My sister, my closest friends, even my college mentor. Their support reminded me of who I was before Ryan's shadow had taken over my life. They didn't judge me for the months I had felt weak or controlled. They simply reminded me that I was capable, intelligent, and worthy of care and respect. The first moment I truly felt my own power again came unexpectedly. I had been applying for a promotion at work, something Ryan had dismissed as too ambitious for me. I had been hesitant, doubting myself, wondering if I could handle it alone. But one evening, I sat down and typed out the application. Every word was deliberate, a declaration that I was capable of handling my own life, my own challenges, without relying on anyone else. A week later, I got the news. I had been promoted. The joy I felt wasn't just professional, it was personal. This was proof that I could thrive without him, that I didn't need the validation of someone who abandoned me when I needed them most. But I didn't stop there. I began taking control of my finances, something I had relied on him for during our relationship. I opened a separate account, started budgeting carefully, and found ways to invest small amounts into myself. Each step, each choice, reinforced the truth I had almost forgotten. I could survive, and more than that, I could flourish. Ryan, of course, had no idea. And I wasn't ready for him to know, not yet. I wanted to rebuild my life fully before he saw any evidence that I had recovered. Part of me imagined the look on his face when he realized that the woman he abandoned had grown stronger in his absence, more confident, and completely untouchable. I also began to reflect on the ways he had tried to manipulate me during our relationship. Every criticism, every controlling act, every disappearing act, it was all a test of power. He wanted me small, compliant, independent. But by surviving, I had passed the ultimate test without even trying. As the weeks turned into months, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I no longer sought his approval. I no longer felt anxious about his opinion. I laughed more freely, spoke my mind without fear, and made decisions without second-guessing whether he would approve. Each day, I was reclaiming pieces of myself that had been buried under his absence, and it felt exhilarating, and yet somewhere deep inside, a quiet fire burned. Not for revenge in the petty sense, but for the ultimate reclaiming of power. If Ryan thought walking away meant he could escape consequences, he was about to learn a hard truth. I didn't need to chase him, confront him, or even argue with him. My life itself would become the evidence of his failure. By the time I looked back at the apartment we had shared, I didn't see emptiness. I saw possibility. I saw freedom. I saw a life built entirely on my terms, without anyone else holding the reins. And that realization was intoxicating. Ryan had vanished thinking he could break me. But in reality, he had done the opposite. He had forced me to discover strength I never knew I possessed. He had given me the opportunity to reclaim not just my life, but my identity. And that I knew was the most powerful form of victory. The months of rebuilding myself had done more than heal the immediate wounds Ryan had left behind. They had shown me the truth about what I was capable of. I no longer needed his approval, his guidance, or his presence to validate my worth. Each choice I made, each small victory, reinforced a growing sense of independence that terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. I started setting goals, personal, financial, professional. No longer was I living day by day, waiting for him to check in or approve of my decisions. I invested in courses to expand my skills, started networking with people I had once been too timid to approach, and even began saving for a move to a city where I could start fresh. Every step I took was deliberate, each one reclaiming space he had tried to occupy in my life. Yet Ryan's shadow lingered. Not physically, but in the memories, the lingering messages on old apps, the guilt he had left behind like a weight around my neck. At first, I considered deleting everything, erasing him from my life entirely, but then I realized that memory was power. I didn't need to erase him. I needed to show myself just how far I had come despite him. The first test came unexpectedly. Ryan attempted to reach out. A simple text popped up. "Hey, hope you're okay." I froze. Part of me wanted to respond, to explain, to justify the months of absence and my choices. But I didn't. I stared at the message, feeling the strange thrill of control settle in. He had vanished from my life, thinking he had all the power. Now, the choice to engage or not was mine entirely. I didn't respond. Instead, I drafted a different kind of message for myself, a mental note that this wasn't about retaliation. It was about demonstration. He had abandoned me, believing I would crumble. Now he would see a woman thriving in his absence. The next step was subtle but precise. I began updating my social media, not for validation, not for attention, but as a public testament to the life I was building. Photos of me at work events, travel trips, and gatherings with friends slowly appeared. My captions were simple, empowering, neutral, yet intentional. I wanted nothing overt, only proof that my life had moved forward and was thriving without him. As the days went by, I noticed something remarkable. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was evolving. My confidence no longer wavered at a call or message from him. I made decisions swiftly, without hesitation. I negotiated deals at work I would have shied away from, spoke up in meetings, and even pursued opportunities I once thought were unattainable. Ryan had created a vacuum when he left, and I had filled it with my own power. And yet, I knew the ultimate victory wouldn't just be thriving without him. It would be ensuring he recognized the cost of walking away. I didn't need to confront him directly. Karma would do that in its own time. But I wanted to make certain that when he eventually glimpsed the life I had built, the life he had tried to control and then abandoned, he would understand what he lost. That night, as I reviewed my plan, I realized how far I had come. I wasn't just surviving, I was orchestrating a transformation. Every step I had taken, every moment I had endured alone, was a calculated move in reclaiming my power. I had gone from feeling abandoned and weak to feeling unstoppable, aware that the balance had shifted entirely. Ryan's absence, once my deepest source of pain, had become my greatest teacher. He had shown me what it meant to face adversity alone. He had forced me to fight for myself, to rediscover my worth, and to construct a life that wasn't dependent on anyone else. The final piece of the puzzle, I realized, was patience. Power isn't proved in haste. It's revealed in the quiet moments when others expect weakness. I would continue building, continue thriving, and continue proving to myself and eventually to him that the person he thought he could control no longer existed. By the time Ryan's curiosity inevitably led him to witness my transformation, it would be too late. The person who had been struggling, panicked, and dependent was gone. In her place stood someone confident, self-assured, and untouchable, a living testament to resilience. And when that moment came, I knew he would finally understand. The power he left behind wasn't just mine to reclaim, it was mine to command. By the time Ryan realized I wasn't waiting around for him, the shift was already complete. The woman he abandoned no longer existed in the form he remembered. I had grown stronger, sharper, and more independent than I could have imagined. Every choice I made was deliberate. Every action a statement that I was no longer his to control. It started with small gestures, almost imperceptible. I began posting updates on social media that showcase my life career achievements, travel, social events, moments of joy I kept hidden while he controlled my time and energy. Nothing flashy, nothing ostentatious, only the truth of my life thriving without him. And then I noticed it. The subtle reactions, the glimpses of surprise from mutual friends. Conversations would start with, "Have you seen what she's been up to?" People I had once distanced myself from were reconnecting, drawn in by the aura of someone in control, someone confident, someone unafraid to live her own life. Ryan reached out again. Another text, this time longer, more insistent. "Can we talk? I miss how things used to be. I think we can work this out." I read it, my heart still beating fast, not with longing, but with clarity. The power dynamic had shifted. He was no longer the one who decided my emotions or actions. I didn't need to answer. My life had become the answer. I also took steps to secure myself fully, making sure he couldn't manipulate or interfere with my progress again. I changed my passwords, moved my savings into accounts he could never access, and began documenting everything about my independence. Every accomplishment, every move forward was mine and mine alone. But the true turning point came when I decided to let him see, not directly, but indirectly, the life he had missed. I attended events he had tried to prevent me from going to, excelled in projects he had said were beyond my capability, and embraced every opportunity I had once been denied. Each time I carried myself with confidence, a quiet but unmistakable statement that I was thriving. Then came the pivotal moment. I ran into Ryan at a networking event, unplanned, unexpected, but inevitable. He froze when he saw me, not with anger, not with scorn, but with a mix of disbelief and regret. The man who had walked away thinking he could escape consequences now saw what he had abandoned. I smiled politely, acknowledging him briefly before turning away, fully aware of the message my presence conveyed. I was no longer someone to pity, no longer someone to control. I had reclaimed my power and transformed it into visibility, an undeniable declaration that his absence had not destroyed me. It had elevated me. In the following days, the effect rippled further. Mutual friends mentioned how different I seemed, how confident, how radiant. Ryan's attempts to reach out became more frequent, desperate even. But I remained untouchable, answering only when necessary, never revealing the full extent of my independence or the satisfaction of my triumph. The final stroke of karma came quietly. I received news that Ryan's career had hit a stumbling block. Opportunities he had pursued with ease in the past were now out of reach. The same confidence that had once allowed him to manipulate me had blinded him to the consequences of abandoning someone capable of thriving independently. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The universe had a way of balancing itself. My life was proof enough. I was stronger, wiser, and completely free. Ryan had walked away thinking he held all the power. But in reality, he had given it to me, and I had used it to rebuild, reclaim, and redefine myself. As I reflected on the journey, I realized the truth of what had happened. The one who left never anticipated the resilience they were creating. They don't see the strength being forged in their absence until it's too late. And by the time Ryan understood, the power wasn't just mine, it was untouchable, undeniable, an irreversible dot, no confrontation, no vindictive act. Just the natural consequence of abandoning someone capable, someone determined, someone unwilling to be diminished. I had survived, and in surviving, I had flourished. And the man who vanished? He had only made my rise inevitable. By the time Ryan fully grasped the life he had abandoned, it was too late. The woman he left behind had not just survived, she had thrived, transformed into someone stronger, wiser, and utterly untouchable. Every move he had once controlled, every word he had once manipulated, now belonged entirely to me. The first sign came subtly. Mutual friends began mentioning my accomplishments casually, unaware he was listening in. Promotions, travel, social achievements, evidence of a life rebuilt without his interference. He tried to mask his surprise, but I could sense it through his messages, tentative and increasingly desperate. Can we meet? I think we should talk. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My life had become the message, loud and undeniable. Next came the social confrontation. Ryan showed up unexpectedly at a professional networking event I was attending. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and regret. He had expected me to appear diminished, uncertain, perhaps even humbled. Instead, he saw someone radiant, confident, and entirely self-assured. Our eyes met across the room. I didn't approach him. I didn't speak. I simply moved through the crowd with poise, engaging with colleagues, sharing laughs, and showing the world that I was no longer dependent on him or anyone else for validation. That was the ultimate statement. The ripple effect of his absence was undeniable. Opportunities he once assumed would be under his influence were now mine, and mine alone. My network expanded, my career accelerated, and my personal life flourished. Each moment of success became another confirmation that abandoning me had been his gravest mistake, but the most profound reckoning was internal. I realized that power isn't about revenge or retribution. It's about reclaiming yourself and letting the consequences of someone else's choices reveal themselves naturally. Ryan's absence had forced me to discover my own capabilities, my resilience, and my independence. The man who had vanished when I struggled had unknowingly forged the strongest version of me. Weeks later, I heard about him indirectly. His career had suffered setbacks, his social circle had shifted, and the life he had taken for granted was no longer his. Those around him began questioning his decisions, noticing the absence of accountability and empathy he had once ignored. The very traits that allowed him to manipulate and abandon me had now left him exposed and vulnerable. I didn't seek out this information. I didn't need to. It found me naturally, almost like confirmation that the universe had corrected itself. Karma had acted quietly but decisively. He had walked away thinking he could escape responsibility, but in doing so, he had sealed his own downfall. The ultimate victory wasn't a confrontation or a dramatic exposure. It was life itself. My life, flourishing without him, was the proof of his loss. He had underestimated me, underestimated my strength, and most importantly, underestimated the resilience that comes when someone refuses to be diminished. I walked through my days with a new sense of freedom, unburdened by guilt, fear, or longing. The emptiness I had felt when he vanished was replaced by clarity, purpose, and self-confidence. I no longer sought validation from anyone. I no longer feared abandonment. I had become the author of my own life, writing each chapter without interference. Ryan eventually reached out one last time. His message was simple, desperate. I see now. I see everything I lost. I didn't respond. I smiled, knowing that the message didn't need words. He had already seen the consequences of his choices in the life I had rebuilt. The power he thought he controlled had shifted irrevocably. And in that moment, I understood something essential. The real power isn't in forcing someone to suffer. It's in reclaiming your life so fully and confidently that their absence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. Ryan thought he had left me broken. He thought vanishing would protect him from responsibility. What he didn't realize was that in abandoning me, he had created the strongest version of the woman he had underestimated. I had survived. I had thrived. And the man who vanished when I struggled had no choice but to watch the woman he left behind rise unshaken, unstoppable, and untouchable. The reckoning had come, not with rage or vengeance, but with the quiet, undeniable power of a life reclaimed. And that power was mine.